Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon again for this portion of the Minot Chamber EDC Workforce Summit. Today, I'm proud to be asked to moderate this group as well as participate in the panel with fellow legislators to discuss workforce. I'm Paul Thomas. I currently reside in Velva, North Dakota. I represent District 6 in the North Dakota House of Representatives. I was first elected to serve in the 2021 legislative session. I am also a member of the Minot Area Chamber EDC Workforce Committee, so I'll be wearing multiple hats today as we discuss this important topics. Joining me on the panel are Representative Cynthia Schreiber-Beck from District 25 in Wahpeton and Representative Emily O'Brien from District 42 in Grand Forks. Representative Cynthia Schreiber-Beck has been in the House since 2015, and she has served on the Education and Ag committees during session. Representative Schreiber-Beck has also served on many interim committees, many of those involving education. Representative O'Brien has been in the House since 2017 and serves on a variety of committees. Currently, she serves on appropriations and government and healthcare committees. Welcome, ladies, to the panel. All right. My transition from moderator to panelist. Now I'm both. All right. So thanks to Kelly, we got some great starter questions to kind of kick off our discussion today. So what we'd like to do is just go through a few questions here with the panel. And then we'd like to open it up to any discussions or questions that you might have from the audience. So, Representative O'Brien and Representative Schreiber-Beck, what thoughts do you have on the various workforce-related bills that came out of the 2023 legislature?
What is it? Age before beauty?
Yeah. Seniority. Go ahead, Cyn.
Yeah, go ahead. What's interesting to me, I want to tell it, is it workforce-related bills, or are we developing a workforce? And I come out of the education arena, so I talk a lot about developing a workforce. As far as workforce-related bills, to me, it's half of what we did in the educational arena. And for that, I think basically from zero to retirement is basically where we're still developing a workforce. So everything that we have done, whether it be through Health and Human Services, and I'll let Emily talk to the bill that she sponsored, but all of that whole gamut is part of developing a workforce. And the interesting part is, if you look back in education, and it doesn't get a lot of attention, except when there's some real negative things. But the piece that we have a strategic vision for education in North Dakota, and that was developed a few years back. It's all on the website for DPI, Department of Public Instruction. But that is really aligned with workforce and the development of our workforce for our future. So when you look at that, and especially career, looking at careers and how do we introduce kids to careers, et cetera, I think that's extremely important. And I look at my notes and see, I think the Office of Legal Immigration, which really does need a name change, I'll agree with that, was one of the other ones. The Labor Department was looking seriously at licensure for those that are licensed. That report is not out yet, but we continue, to fund what we think works. And so you can look across the gamut, but what did we do for workforce? And the Senate last session had a workforce committee. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
So when I think about what we did the last legislative session, I think the greatest part about North Dakota and the way that our legislator operates and runs is your legislators are so easily accessible. Getting text messages in committee, hey, what about this idea? Or have we thought about this? We saw through Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to Health and Human Services, specifically on the Appropriations Committee that I work on. And I think about our day-to-day challenges. I joke a lot that I'm the voluntold in my boyfriend's company, which is commercial painting and drywall. not necessarily a sexy business whatsoever. And I'll go and do a punch list. I'll help get materials onto the job site. I've done daycare drop-off the same time I've done employee drop-off on a job site because they don't have transportation. Some of our employees are mainly Spanish speaking, and so how do we adjust to that? My boyfriend's trying to get our 5-year-old to learn Spanish so she can help with translating. It's a pipe dream right now, but it's how do we figure out what we need to do to make it work? And it's getting the bureaucracy out of the way. We did with the governor's office had the red tape reduction 1.0 last session. And to me, there's so much that we can do to get the government out of the way to allow businesses to do what they need to do. I'm that entrepreneurial mindset of, we don't need to necessarily break the laws, but can we bend them a little bit to get the stuff done that we need to? How do we pivot? We saw the childcare package that has been discussed this morning by Jessica, and how do we continue to push it? How do we continue to move the needle forward? I just toured like a month ago out in Stanley. No, it was in Tioga. It was Kathleen Nessett. She has in her facility a childcare center for her employees, and they don't have to pay for childcare. I think about how much time that would save me if I didn't have to leave work 20 minutes earlier. Oh, and if there's a train, then I got to do a detour. So that takes, 10 more minutes of my time. Go pick up at a facility, check out, bring them to the appointment, go back and drop them off at school or daycare, and then get back into my office. It's a 2-hour detour. With having my kids right next door sharing a wall, I could drop them off, pick up in the same breath. That would be huge. It's almost as easy as saying bye to your boss for the day. And that's a benefit for her employees. That's a huge cost savings for them. And she's had 100% retention. No one's leaving. I wouldn't either.
I think just to kind of expand upon that, the childcare thing, as we had those discussions during legislative session, I think it was brought forward very early on in the governor's address to us as legislators, the state of the state, to begin the session, that was, a very important piece that he felt needed to be addressed by the legislature and working with the business community to try and help alleviate some of the workforce needs for our employers. And it was a very involved discussion over 4 months to come up with what we did. And a second part of what we were going to talk about on this topic was the measurables when we go back into session, or what are we seeing as a result of those. And I think what we saw today, at least from my perspective as a legislator, hearing the presenters that spoke earlier this morning, was really helpful to me to begin to see what the fruits of what we did is. And I think one of the comments that was made that we have to all keep in perspective is this was the beginning of a long-term process. What we did through some of these programs and as they're being enacted, we're not going to see immediate successes that are going to be like overwhelming. Like, yes, the legislature, we want to go totally down this route, or no, we don't want to go down that route. And I think one thing that we as legislators have to definitely keep in mind when we evaluate these is just because one of these might be a success and another a failure, the failures sometimes we learn more from and can build upon better and create the other one better than just necessarily a moderate success. So I think we as legislators, going back, Emily's in appropriations, right now Cynthia and I are both in policy, we'll each have our avenues to look at those from that perspective, but we'll take that back, we'll hear from the proponents of it, and then we'll come forward, out of this next legislative session with maybe new solutions or continued solutions. But one of the things I've really noticed in my district is the increased conversations on childcare. So not necessarily just the dollars getting allocated to it, but just the conversations have spurred private investment into new childcare centers. Some of those have been done with zero state or federal money. It's just been individuals that saw the need in their community and they did it. And I think those are the type of individuals that we as legislators are going to be wanting our Health and Human Service Department and us and the governor's office to be meeting with those people and saying, can you share that success story, that roadmap with other childcare centers throughout the state? How can this be done? And I think those are important conversations. And I'm just using the childcare, one as an example of all the legislative things that we did last session.
And the other piece, and we've talked about it briefly here this morning, is that public-private partnership, and that's essentially important. The government can't do it all, and so whether or not is it our responsibility to do it all? I'm not sure, but we should have the programs. But then it's also, we do a very poor job of marketing. I think, and we never attach marketing money to policy that we put out, and so somehow that information has to be dispersed amongst everybody that can utilize it. But and I think our workforce development team does a great job, but also Greater North Dakota Chamber and all the local chambers and all the economic development pieces are always promoting, but we have to have listeners too, and then people that become involved to see that it does work. And then the other thing I wanted to add that I don't want to forget, like we're sitting in this beautiful CTE center, which that is one of the huge workforce development bills that has come across. And also we have programs through our colleges and universities, the career builders and things that are available that I don't know how much business and industry actually utilize them, but just go on the website, and those are tremendous public-private partnerships. Sorry to have to interrupt an ad, but I want to forget that.
So to continue on, thinking of what the state can do. So what do you feel maybe some of the highest priority should be from the state as it pertains to helping fix the workforce problem?
I wrote on Paul's note sheet, get out of the way. I say that almost lightheartedly because we do need to have an involvement, and the end goal would be to work our way out of some of these problems that we're having. I'd love to be able to say in 10 years, look at this investment that we had in childcare and we've solved the problem. Sometimes that can be a reality and sometimes it's not. I think being able to find those people that are going to be champions, help roll up their sleeves, no matter what the issue is, whether it's childcare, whether it's energy, property taxes is a huge one right now. We're seeing some problems that are coming, but what are the solutions to those problems? As a legislator, you can only do so many things with so many people, but we're our own interns, we're our own staff. We don't have a team of people. When you want to talk to someone, it's me. It's my cell phone that you're calling or texting or my email. Sometimes I'm a couple months behind in getting back to people, but that's sometimes the reality when you're running in 10 different directions. And so here are the problems, but hey, here's a solution. Can we see if this works? That's a huge help when we're looking at issues and what is the implementation. And to me, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent, I want to know the whole story. What was the worst case scenario, and how do we work ourselves out of that? But I still kind of stand by, getting out of the way of the good work that we're doing. How do we pivot? How do we have successes? And how do we showcase that? We talk about the communications of things. You know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. I think about a lot of my friends that live in Fargo or Grand Forks and aren't politically affiliated with anything whatsoever. They just go about their daily lives. And I had no idea when I was 23 when I got elected how much politics really plays into our day-to-day lives of everything. I know serving on transportation committee, I know more about rumble strips and tunnel covers than I'd ever want to imagine, but that's the job that we're elected to do. And getting the information in the hands of those people. When Jessica had the cards that she talked about, I looked over at Paul Thomas. I said, let's get these in the grocery stores. They're all going to the grocery stores in the kids aisle. How do you reach, the target audience that you're trying to access? They're not going to think about Googling a workforce program for childcare. I wouldn't. I'm already in chaos mode running in 6 different directions. But if it's right in front of me at the grocery store when I'm picking up formula, It's right in front of my face. So how do we get it right in front of people to make it easier for them? Probably didn't really answer the question of
you did.
focusing on those challenges, but that's kind of where my brain went.
Okay. I like the way your brain works, Sam. So, okay. So what could we focus on? Well, we've had the tax credit for automation. I think that's been quite successful. So let's not slash it because it works and it does help in our workforce. But then we have to also make sure we want to retrain those people to use that automation. So that's key. What else? Oh, nimble. We're not necessarily nimble. We talked to, I think Katie addressed that this morning, because we only meet once every 2 years. But I think that we should look at what has worked in policy and then fund exactly what, we shouldn't be slashing funding on programs that seem to be successful or headed in the right direction. And that's where I think everybody in this room comes in, because we need to hear what has been successful, what has not been successful. But I think, you go through 900 bills in a session. So if I can pinpoint a bill number, I can't. But some of those things have been highly successful, and we just need to continue them. But we need to hear from our constituents what they feel is very successful as well, and make suggestions for change.
I think one of the things you touched on earlier, Cindy, and one of the speakers hit on too, was you touched on how much the state has invested in like CTE centers to better educate our youth for job readiness. That they're leaving their place of education ready to go into the workforce and ready to be a direct asset for that employer. And as we continue to look at the evolving face of what public education and higher education looks like, I think that's where the nimbleness of our systems need to definitely be. As we see employers' needs change, the educational needs, are going to have to change as well, and the way the state funds those needs and provides that education is going to have to change. And in one of the mentions of bringing people into North Dakota, I think it was Katie that mentioned the costs. That family could spend $17,000 in transportation costs to move here. Now, if we back that up, if we get that person here as a freshman at Minot State University, their costs to come here are a tank of gas. If we can educate them here and keep them here, and retain them, that cost is gone. So I think as we look at our investment in higher ed and career building programs, that helps build our workforce. And I think we're seeing that locally too, with some of the programs we're developing and expanding. For instance, we have the dental hygienist program here in town now. You educate people in the local community here, you're likely going to be able to retain them here. We see the Botno is expanding their nursing program. So you teach nurses in Botno, North Dakota, there's a lot better chance that they're going to reside in that area and go to work at the hospital in Rolla or Botno or Rugby or a rural community or Minot, versus if they get educated in Fargo or Grand Forks, it's a lot harder to bring them back. So I think that overall approach of, trying to bring the education to where the jobs are needed is an approach that I would really like to see the legislative and government role continue to provide that way.
Paul, adding on to that we have an opportunity in our state to double down. We can do all of that, getting into the classrooms, getting our private sector companies to go in and say, hey, do you want to come try this for the day, come job shadow? Students, may not have even known that those opportunities existed unless it was put in front of them. So I think that's, across our entire state, I think that's a huge opportunity that we can, leverage on, and we don't need legislation to do it.
Yeah.
Right, and I think to add into that, we just said, Emily, the Learn Everywhere bill, and I don't know how many in industry and business are aware of it, or even at the chamber, any place, that there was a bill that came across 4 years ago, and it was remanufactured a little bit last session. But and CTE students can all right now go out and do that, but our regular academic students that weren't in a CTE program could not. So that came into being 4 years ago, but we've seen very, very little usage of it. But those students can get credit But part of the issue is you have to get your district motivated enough to have a teacher record and do some, it takes a little bit of work, but it's highly beneficial for the students. We have 2 or 3 districts right now that are doing that. But again, if we want to keep our youth here and to be our eventual workforce, we need to be doing these things and they're available. So again, poor marketing on the part of the legislature, but those programs are out there, and I would guess that maybe nobody is aware of it right here in this room.
So each of us come from different areas of the state, different communities. Emily, you're from the big metropolis of Grand Forks, and Cindy from the mid-sized town of Wahpeton, and me from the mighty small town of Velva. We all have different workforce challenges in each of our communities. What do you see as the most challenging in your communities?
We have so many different challenges. One that really comes to mind is housing. We talk about affordable housing. Specials were a killer for a lot of people before they even could buy the lot to build a home. Or, gosh, I could go on and on about all the challenges. I'm trying to think of like the top priorities. We're building a new school in our community. Property tax is a conversation, again, that is coming up. And a couple years ago, we had a ballot measure to build a new school and new kitchen for schools. And it was like a $76 million price tag. And a little over 2,800 people voted to vote yes, and 1,100 voted no. And we have a population of 72,000, and that's, a property tax increase. When you only have about 4,000 people that show up to vote and 72,000 people live in your community that don't show up, that creates that, I didn't know about this. Well, how do we get that messaging to those people to get engaged, understanding that, everything's hindsight 2020. So the property tax issue is one. I look at what mandates do we put on at the state level that aren't utilized or effective at our local level with our cities, counties, school boards, school districts, that are another burden and another cost to our local taxpayers. And then another one that we're looking at is the natural gas pipeline that comes from the west to the east. We have several different business opportunities on the east side of the state that we could use, but it's getting the pipe in the ground and transferring it from one side of the state to the other has been another conversation. But that's been I think we're on the sixth year of that being in conversation for us. So there's all sorts of things, but just to name a few.
Well, Wahpeton doesn't have any issues, right? Workforce related. Now, interestingly enough, we have a lot of manufacturing industry. There's agricultural manufacturing there. Recently, a Swedish company purchased probably the largest agricultural manufacturer, equipment manufacturer in Wahpeton, and they're going to need 200 employees. They have probably 100 and some right now. It's going to be their North American headquarters. So you can imagine the investment they've put in and what they've done. If you come to Wahpeton, go out on Highway 13, and it's a mega building. They're just in the throes of finishing. But where do they get that workforce? Right now, we'll take them from another manufacturing and a specialized industry, Comdell, right? So so it's like moving a body from one spot to another is what's happening until we can get more people in. And the people problem is, again, where's the housing? Yep. And affordable housing, let's just say. And, on top of that, it's the childcare issue. So we've done pretty well. We have some really great private childcare facilities and, of course, home childcare as well. But you look at that, and from a manufacturing standpoint, getting that workforce in, and Mindac Farmers Cooperative, which is a sugar beet manufacturer, the sugar has brought in some of the workers through some of the programs, and they're from Central and South America, and it's been working quite well. And I think Paula probably bring up the H2A workers because that's ag. We're heavy ag. And so, but we're missing just people and people that are willing to work. So that's the other factor that goes with it. So, how do we, we have to continue with great leadership, and we have to have those public-private partnerships that promote and push so that we get these people to come to settle in Wahpeton.
I think, Cindy, as you mentioned, the H2A program, in my community, we're certainly agricultural based as a, let's say, a suburb or a hub of Minot, providing, labor force up here that want to live in a smaller community. But one of the things that is working and is a tool that's been utilized, it started, I would say, by some of larger farm operators that were needing seasonal employees and weren't able to obtain those seasonal employees. They utilized the H2A program. So that program allows a employee to come over here from another country, work in the United States for 9 months in an agricultural related field. And then they go back home for 3 months, and then they're eligible, if their employer wants them, to bring them back over here for 9 months. So from a commodity production standpoint, farming standpoint, that really was a conducive environment, especially in North Dakota with the long winters. It was the busiest time of the season. You're able to bring these people over here. They were, very willing and wanting to work, assimilated well in the local communities, and they still do today. And the success of that has just grown. Where now, when I go to my local elevator, whether it's to dump grain, whether it's to buy products, whether it's them coming out and doing the custom application of a spray or a fertilizer, almost, I would say, over half of those employees are also on that H2A program. So it's expanded beyond just the local farmer, but hiring these individuals. It's now in the agronomy centers. It's in, almost anything ag related. We have a building manufacturer in our community that principally does agricultural storage type buildings. So he qualified this coming year. 15 of his employees are all going to be H2A. And, it's going to alleviate that struggle of having to have that constant turnover, because once they're here, they're here. And I think one of the successes from that is, versus one of the comments in one of our workforce development meetings that we had earlier this year, one of the people from the oil field industry, when they were talking about getting employees, they said, well, there's only so many people, and we have all these jobs, and everyone's looking for them. So essentially, and I think the term is, not meant in a harsh way, but it's the truth, is you're stealing an employee. You're most likely taking someone that's working for someone else in some field and bringing them over there. You're not really solving, as a general rule, a workforce problem. You're just solving maybe your problem, but not that problem. So one of the advantages I think of as we look at bringing workers from other countries, we're not stealing. We're adding to the labor force, allowing maybe that employee that would have worked on my farm to now work at wherever that is in Velva or Minot or wherever that is. So I think one of the keys that as we look at bringing outside people into our country, I think, to me, is a logical solution that helps truly solve the workforce problem that we have in this state. So what topics or needs are you hearing about, either from interim committees you are part of, or just the conversations that you're participating in that could be coming to the 25 legislative session?
Well, I've heard recently through the grapevine that one of the committees is putting, I think it's $200 million to housing, some shape or form. Now, the bill obviously hasn't passed, and it's just in committee right now, but there was, I believe, it was not, poo-pooed by all the committee members. So it will go, I believe it'll go forward. I don't think it's going to be individual. I think it'll be a committee bill. You heard that?
Yep, government services.
Government Services just did that last week, if I'm not mistaken. So that's something to look forward to. Education, continually trying to, we just had a conversation looking at, are we not serving our students well by, instead of doing the formative math schedule, algebra, etc., can we not integrate that along with writing skills, reading, whatever, into more career-based education versus the last time I heard somebody ask about what they knew about Shakespeare in a job interview, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody ask. So, let's get them into that career alignment and be able to read career manuals, technical manuals, etc., and have that suffice. We do have one program in Bismarck that is doing that, I believe in their mathematics arena, but I don't know that we have it in the English literature, etc. arena. So I think that would be huge. So we're talking about that. Obviously the childcare, we don't want to drop the ball on that. One of the things that concerns me that it's not in our committee by any means, but it's on the ballot this year, is the measure for the legalization of recreational marijuana. Having come from owning businesses and specific to aviation, I have a lot of fear I would have a lot of fear as a business owner with the legalization of recreational marijuana. So that to me, it's not, if it passes, we're going to have to deal with it. But I think there's a lot more harm for business and industry. And some people say, well, it'll bring people to the state. Well, maybe so, I don't know. But that one I'm concerned about, because I think it's going to be Colorado. A number of years ago when Colorado passed, and obviously their law is different than what was written and what's in this measure, but talking to their legislators, and this is a number of years ago, their manufacturing sector suffered immensely because nobody trusted quality control anymore. So, you look at that and maybe we can learn from others. My other concern is our youth. So we're already vaping marijuana. So can we, how do we handle that from a K-12 education or a college education standpoint?
One other thing that I think of too is that we have been working on in the interim is guardianship programs. We have some record numbers of youth that are in our systems that need foster care or adoption or respite services. And so we had a bill that will be coming forward from our government finance committee that was also, it wasn't last week, it was the week before. And then we had a couple on insurance, but I think it all comes back to the marketing piece of this, all the things that we're doing and working on. How do we get them into the hands of our citizens? Sometimes our good work that we're doing doesn't make the front page because it's not dramatic enough or someone didn't say something ridiculous. So how do we get that messaging out there and showcase the stuff that we're doing and getting people to utilize the programs and continuing to improve them? North Dakota is number one in so many different areas. And I think we can showcase a lot of these areas that we're continuing to be number one in. But it'll be interesting to see some of the bills that come forward. I think right now we're at about 500 bills that have already been drafted, which is like record numbers for session, which is terrifying to say, if that many bills are coming forward. So before session even begins. So that will be interesting as well. Last session we had 998 bills was the final total, and that's a lot to do in 80 days. So if we're already at 500, be some long nights and early mornings.
I think the other thing that was just briefly hit on, but it's been an ongoing effort by many in the legislature, is to look at licensure and compacts across the different industries. So whether it's, foreign workers coming in, or whether it's with that skill set, or whether it's state to state. So Being the community we live in here, next to the Minot Air Force Base, where Emily is, next to Grand Forks, that military spouse, being able to get them in the workforce immediately with their licensure from whatever state they might have obtained that from. The legislature has continually worked on that to accommodate that from across all professions, whether it's a hairdresser, whether it's a teacher, whether dental hygienist, whatever that may be. So it's actually one of the things 4 years ago, just starting to serve in the legislature then and serving on Industry, Business, and Labor Committee. I had no idea there was all of those licensure requirements across state lines being so different. I would have never had any idea how difficult it was to maybe enter a profession just by moving across state lines. So the legislature has certainly taken steps there as well.
That makes me laugh because Paul sat next to me in IBL, and I think we had one of the cosmetology bills. He goes, is this serious right now? Are we really doing this? And that's how it runs and operates when we have those licensure compacts.
So Cindy and Emily, all three of us have worked for others. We've all had our own businesses, very involved with that. So what do you have for business owners and people here for best practices or advice, nonprofits, whatever it is, trying to make workforce-related improvements for their company?
I'll go ahead and start. I think putting myself in some of the situations that I've been is having the conversations. It doesn't have to be, a beautiful one-pager or a white page paper. It can be a couple bullet points. It can be a quick text message. It's having the conversation, having the right people at the table, engaging, asking all the questions. When I was first elected, I still take notes on everything, but understanding the history behind things. Why was this established and where are we now? Why have we not implemented or improved things? Some of our legislation that we've looked at, marriage license, for example, the fee for it was introduced in 1977 by Representative Steve Swantek, in fact, and it was $10 when he introduced it. It hasn't changed since then. So it's been almost 50 years and it's still $10. And so understanding the history of things and, asking all the questions, finding the experts in that or the people that can have influence or figuring out who your legislators are. That was, how do you contact them? How do you find out other people across the state that may be passionate on what you're working on? It doesn't necessarily have to be your legislators in your district. I know I've had people from all over the state reach out saying, hey, I heard you know all about this. Can we have a conversation? And I'm more than happy to. So I think it's, we're all busy. We all have stuff going on, but we just figure out how to make time and make it happen and have those, conversations. And sometimes for me, it's a 9:00 at night conversation after I put the kids down for bed. And that's just what we do. That's where we start.
I would say if you're looking at making workforce improvements for your company, number one, analyze the company. And I think the other thing in today's world, we talk about the generation that's coming into the workforce. And again, every generation's a different generation. We need to understand those generations and what your expectation is for that generation. And also find out what's available that's going to be beneficial for you and your employees. And like, just as we were talking, the childcare issue, the issue, but some of the resolve that's been that has made a lot of difference and will make a lot of difference in the future in the childcare issue. And if you can offer some benefits to those employees that align along those housing, childcare, any of that, how do you utilize that to the best of your ability? But yet we're all there from an ownership standpoint. We're there to be successful. We might not become millionaires, but we want to be successful. So you have to weigh out all and balance all of that. But I have companies, a local company which has now been sold off, but it's not my company, but another company that managed to put mental health at the forefront and had services available for their employees. So, that's a huge issue right now, that whole mental health arena, and we have a lack of service providers but they managed to have that at the forefront. And so find out what your needs are for your employees and see how you can manage to adapt your company to those needs.
I think one of the things I've seen, our two sons are now, early mid-20s, and just seeing them enter the workforce. We have, I would consider myself middle-aged. We have an older employee as well, and understanding as we are in the workforce is a couple things. One is each one of those generations are looking for different things from their employment. Some are driven by money. Some are driven by time off. Some are driven by the work environment, the team aspect. So there's a lot of triggers that make that employee happy or make them want to stay as part of your team. And so how do you facilitate that in your particular business? I thought I just want to share this. Like my youngest son that just graduated went to work for a company in Fargo, and it was kind of interesting. I never even thought about implementing this myself, but it really makes sense. He's in a job that he doesn't necessarily have to be there at 8 in the morning and leave at 5. He works some weekends. He works sometimes in the morning. It depends on kind of who he's working with at that particular time. And there's about 40 to 50 people that work in this business. But their schedule is essentially to him, and I think it's good for that younger generation, is here's your task, here's your job, here's our expectations, get it done. It's not show up at 8, leave at 5. That's your expectation, 40 hours. No, your expectation is an end product. And I think I see, and I don't think it's just a younger generation. I think many of us want to have that. What is that desired outcome? What is that goal? And if we can make those employees and our team workers feel like they're accomplishing that and part of that team and part of that overall success, that really helps build that. And I think from a retention standpoint, that's really important, and in building and growing our businesses and our communities. So with that, I didn't, as a moderator, I should have looked at what time I was supposed to wrap up, but I have 3 minutes. So we have time for
One question.
Mayor Ross.
First of all, I want to thank you for what you do, all the other legislators that are here. You've done a lot of hard work. It's often said we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So is there a program or a policy or something in another state that you look at and you go, gee, I wish we could implement that in North Dakota?
There are. I mean, that happens a lot. And I don't know if you're looking at a particular policy or just the premise of doing that. Right. Yeah. No, we do that because we have national organizations that are nonpartisan. There's probably 3 or 4 that North Dakota is a member of. And they have researchers, and plus they carry all the information as to what the policies are. I mean, you could read for weeks on all of this. But what's interesting is that implementation and how that bill looks. And I can say right now, last session, I mean, the science of reading, we want our 3rd graders to have the skills to read in order to read to learn as they progress. So, I mean, you looked at that and you looked what other states were doing and how can we do this, but how can we make it work in North Dakota? So we don't want to necessarily copy, word for word, but we do look at all of that. We're looking at so many different aspects, I think, from just everything. I mean, we're well aware of what a lot of other states are doing. Cell phone, we talked about that. Paul and I talked about that earlier. Some states are mandating no cell phones. The governor is said, hey, no cell phones in
schools.
Schools, right. So, I mean, is that going to work for North Dakota? I just listened to a webinar that said digital tools, which is a phone, teacher mentoring, and personalized education. That's what's going to move us forward. Well, digital tools, that's a cell phone too. So, how do you weigh that and balance that? But yes, we look at a lot of different legislation across the country.
I don't have a good response to that, so we have time for one more question, if there is any. If not, we'll keep everyone on track. I want to thank you for having us here today, and thank you, Cindy and Emily, for coming out and spending your time with us in the Minot area, and appreciate your insight and all that you've done to help make this conference good.
It's always fun to come to the Magic City.